Hello and welcome to PFF Wire. Happy Halloween. I am Doug Kyed, joined as always by Brad Spielberger. I think Brad today is dressed up like a NFL fan who's actually encouraged by the progress of his football team. Brad, the Chicago Bears have traded Roquan Smith to the Baltimore Ravens. I think everyone's waiting for your response to this. Thoughts on this trade?
Yeah, first off, thank you, Ryan Poles. 2 shows in a row now. We get a trade about 20 minutes before you and I go live. So I appreciate the content. I think this is a great trade. All jokes aside, a second rounder and a fifth rounder for a guy you probably were going to franchise tag at around $20 million, because for folks that don't know, the linebacker franchise tag includes outside linebackers for some dumb reason. So a massive price tag on a guy that was looking to become one of the highest paid defensive players in the NFL. Was asking for over $20 million per year this offseason. He is a good player. I don't think he's a special world-beating, difference-making player. And for Baltimore, who I will say is probably one of, if not my favorite front offices, I really do not like and understand this move. Biggest reason why: you don't really have the franchise tag at your disposal because you need to use it on Lamar Jackson. So now you trade a second and fifth round pick for a guy that plays off-ball linebacker, not a premium position, and he kind of has all the leverage to get that massive extension from you. You have no Rashad Bateman for a couple of weeks, don't really have a lot of receiver talent to speak of. Lamar, obviously, the last year of his rookie deal. So don't really get it from their perspective. Love it from Chicago's perspective. Ryan Poles is going to rebuild this thing from the ground up.
Okay, so Roquan Smith so far this season has a 50.8 PFF grade. It's kind of been going up and down all year. I tweeted out that it was an 85.4 in week 7 against the Patriots, only a 28.5 yesterday for the Chicago Bears. He adds to a Ravens linebacker core that already included Malik Harrison. He's got a 66.7 PFF grade this year. Patrick Queen with a 59.8, Josh Bynes with a 54.2, but Bynes has been kind of in and off the active roster. So I guess the question here for you, Brad, is why has Roquan Smith, at least his grade, looked like he's kind of struggled so far this season?
I will say this. I think right now it is really, really difficult to grade well as an off-ball linebacker. And it's something that, look, for all transparency's sake, we're always trying to improve here, make everything better. There's no inherent flaw because it applies to everyone. But still, I think the position has become so difficult because in a world of two high safeties, there is so much stress on linebackers to cover, to still fit in the run game with lighter box counts now because of those safeties. It's kind of become, we always talk about how cornerback is the hardest position to play in the NFL, probably still is, but I think off-ball linebacker is becoming kind of into that category. So, a 50.8 at off-ball linebacker is maybe a little bit different than at a different position where we have a higher average grade number. But right. Yeah, you watch him play. He is a special athlete. He went top 10 for a reason. He can cover very well. I know right now he has a career low coverage grade, but is a top 10 coverage off-ball linebacker his first 4 seasons before this year. His issue for me always has been he cannot shed blocks. He needs someone else to take on blocks. He can get, 200 tackles a season. I think he's leading the NFL right now in tackles, but it's not from him pushing to, offensive linemen off of him and then making the play. It's only if he's kept clean is where he struggles.
Yeah, I guess I'm interested to see how he fits in the Ravens defense, if he can be a slightly better fit there. I know that, they've kind of wavered back and forth between whether they like those bigger linebackers or smaller linebackers, but certainly adds a premium player at that position to their group. For the Bears, our coworker Ari just tweeted this out. Their draft picks next year: 1 first, 2 seconds, a third, 2 fourths, 2 fifths, and a 7th round pick. So, that's what you've got to love the most as a Bears fan. And quite honestly, I know the Bears looked good in week 7 against the Patriots, but this is not a team that's probably going to be going anywhere fast very soon.
I think the thing that Ryan Poles, their general manager, understands is that, look, you can make some of these all-in moves or some of these aggressive moves or pay guys and stuff like that, in my opinion, if you have the premium positions figured out. Those are, besides obviously quarterback, and that's kind of still a work in progress. Fields has played better. But, offensive tackle, where they maybe have 1 guy. Edge rusher, where they probably have 0. Wide receiver, where they, I think, have 1 in Darnell Mooney. If you don't have those positions figured out, why would you spend $20 million on an off-ball linebacker? Yes, they have a ton of resources, but now with all this draft capital and all that money, look, I wouldn't be shocked if they actually flip some of these extra picks to go get a guy like a T. Higgins or someone that maybe reaches free agents, or, a team is willing to move because they don't want to pay him. That's just one name I love to throw out because, Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow are about to get $1 bazillion. But, I wouldn't be surprised if they're saying, look, we need to fix the offense first. Look, Chicago's had great defenses my entire life. It's meant nothing. So the offense, spend there, and then maybe work on adding, off-ball linebackers and stuff like that.
For the Ravens, I mean, yeah, you have to assume that at this point, giving up what they did, they're going to have to sign him to a long-term deal. It is somewhat surprising. And do you think, I guess, that Roquan Smith, now that this trade has happened, it's been kind of a long process here where Roquan Smith, asked for a trade this summer. The Bears didn't give it to him. The Bears said they keep him on the roster this season. It was still always a possibility, obviously, that something like this could happen where he is traded at mid-season. But do you think he'll actually wind up getting the contract that he desires from the Ravens?
They're not going to be strong-held, however you're supposed to say that. They are, like I said, they're a competent front office. It's kind of funny now. They're dealing with two players that do not have an official agent in representation. So that's always complicated when you're negotiating directly with the player. Obviously, with Roquan Smith, he has an advisor in St. Omni, but nevertheless, I do, because if you give up a second-round pick and a fifth-round pick, and I said the biggest thing, not having that franchise tag at your disposal, I mean, unless you're not going to franchise tag Lamar Jackson, which obviously would be insane, you kind of have to, right? If you spend that much money on a rental, it's just, that much draft compensation. I'm going a mile a minute here. On a rental at off-ball linebacker, that's just kind of puzzling to me. So I think they will, and I'm telling you, I think he's going to become the highest-paid off-ball linebacker in football. Right now, that is Darius Leonard, just below $20 million per year. I don't see how he doesn't surpass that, because this gives so much leverage. We've seen it with Jalen Ramsey, Laramie Tunsil. I mean, we can spend 5 minutes on all the guys that get the big contract after the trade. He's the next one in line.
Yeah, and the one I will say that obviously if this was for a first-round pick, then there would be no question whatsoever that the Ravens would then have to turn around and give Roquan Smith the big money deal. I do think that this is like right on the line there, where I think that the Ravens obviously think that they're going to be good for the rest of the season, that they will be playoff contenders, that second-round pick will be pretty low in the pecking order. If they do allow Roquan Smith to get what he desires in free agency and he signs a $20 million deal with someone else, then you would think that if they spend wisely, if they plan correctly, they would get a third-round compensatory pick for Roquan Smith, but that wouldn't be until, 2024 at this point? So they'd be trading a 2023 second-round pick plus a fifth-round pick and half a season of Roquan Smith for a future third-round pick. I don't think that's the best order of business, but it's kind of it's teetering on the realm of possibility, I'd say.
That's actually a great point. Famously, I think the Eagles did the best job of this. They traded a third-round pick to Detroit for wide receiver Golden Tate a couple of years ago. He comes in. They end up getting, I want to say, a fourth-round compensatory pick. So it's almost kind of a pick swap. Yes, it's a year later. I'm of the belief that the time value of a pick where they kind of discount it for future years, I think, is silly. I think the Ravens are smarter than that and don't buy into that. Obviously, you want picks as soon as possible. But yeah, that is a good point. At that point, if you're giving a swap of a 2 and a 3 and a fifth, and you think maybe it's kind of, opening up a Super Bowl window or something like that, it's much more palatable, much more understanding. At the same time, if the Ravens deem Roquan Smith not good enough to extend, is there going to be a team that wants to spend, $20 million per year on him in free agency? Maybe that's the question, but that is a great point to point out, no question.
And then the last piece of the puzzle here, someone just dropped this in the comments, is the cap space that the Bears now have to spend next offseason. Can you talk a little bit about how much cap space the Bears will have to work with? And, what they could possibly do with that next year?
Yeah, so first and foremost, this hasn't been reported yet, but I think it's a near certainty. Roquan Smith was owed about $5.4 million for the rest of the season. The Ravens have less than half of that in cap space right now. So just like with Robert Quinn, I would bet a decent amount of money that the Bears converted his entire salary above the minimum, and they kept all of that on their books and then sent him off to the Baltimore Ravens. So all they'll end up really clearing is about another, again, $600,000 or whatever the case may be on that minimum amount going forward. So essentially it's kind of the same as before in terms of their cap space next year. But yes, about $125 million, more than double the next highest team in the NFL, and now all these picks as well. Look, they're going to be the biggest spenders of this offseason. They honestly don't have a choice. They need to for minimum cash spending over 2021 to 2023, which is why I said I wouldn't be surprised if they explore trading and extending a guy, or just, extending Darnell Mooney, extending Jalen Johnson, Cole Kmet, like all these guys in-house, and then a lot of these top free agents, Jacoby Myers, Mike McGlinchey, yada, 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 they're going to be in on every single one of those players because they got to spend some of this cash.
And that's the other element to this, is that the Bears couldn't let Roquan Smith walk in free agency and expect to get that third-round compensatory draft pick, because if they're signing Mike McGlinchey, or if they're signing Jacoby Myers, if they're signing these high-priced free agents, then that would cancel out Roquan Smith, and they wouldn't get that third-round pick for him if they did let him walk in free agency. So lots of different elements to explore here. While we are talking about the Ravens, let's get into our Fresh Off the Wire segment here. They dealt with some injuries in Thursday night's game. Rashad Bateman now expected to be out a few weeks with that foot injury. Tight end Mark Andrews day-to-day with a shoulder. Running back Gus Edwards also dealing with a hamstring injury. But does seem like the one that's going to be the most serious is that Rashad Bateman injury. And I guess it's kind of surprising that the Ravens pull off this deal for a linebacker rather than a wide receiver, because I think that was probably a bigger need right now for the Ravens. And they probably wouldn't have had to turn around and give that player $20 million a year, but seems like they'll probably just, I don't know. We'll see what happens moving forward here, but at least through the first 8 weeks of the season, they've been trying to weather the storm there at wide receiver.
Maybe they're a quiet contender in the Odell Beckham Jr. sweepstakes or something like that, where they have another plan in mind, because, they really are struggling at wide receiver. Rashad Bateman expected to miss a couple of weeks. They do, though. I think you have a Thursday into they're playing this Monday against New Orleans. Then I want to say it's their bye, and then they play Carolina, I believe is how it is. So they could be 7-3, a rested, much healthier 7-3 football team. With the AFC North kind of just them and the Bengals, and the Bengals obviously won't have Jamar Chase for about a month. So it is a little strange. I think it's kind of a weird allocation of resources. Obviously use that first round pick on Patrick Queen. He's been, so far. But yeah, they really just don't seem to stress wide receiver that much. They did bring in Deshaun Jackson, but he's obviously, 35 years old at this point. It's interesting. It is an interesting approach. And if it comes back to bite them, it wouldn't really surprise a lot of us, I should say.
Yeah. And obviously it's a good sign that Mark Andrews is day-to-day with that shoulder injury, but he was questionable heading into Thursday night, got banged up, had to leave that game. Ravens still won that matchup, but if you're talking about not having Rashad Bateman, if you're talking about not having Mark Andrews, then that wide receiver core and that pass catching core really gets depleted very quickly. All right, let's talk about some other news from around the NFL. The Lions fired defensive backs coach Aubrey Pleasant. This comes as a bit of a surprise, because I think that some people, at least, people who follow the Lions closely, thought that if at some point Aaron Glenn left to become a head coach, then maybe Aubrey Pleasant could become that next defensive coordinator in waiting. I think this is kind of he's kind of a scapegoat right now for some of the Lions' struggles, because the Lions, quite honestly, don't have a lot of talent in that secondary. And beyond Jeff Okudah, it's a lot of guys who are kind of like low draft picks, undrafted guys. They were trying to get the best out of them. I'm not sure how much this will really help, but I do think that with a 1-7 start or 1-6 start, whatever it is for the Lions, they did probably need to make a change somewhere.
Yeah, it's tough. Will Harris is a converted safety and is trying to play cornerback this year for them. And also, they're still sticking with a heavy man coverage concept, which has been kind of killing them since this new regime came in. Yeah. I think this podcast, we are fans and have heard good things about Aaron Glenn, about Aubrey Pleasant. I think they are good coaches. Obviously, when they were in New Orleans, they were a phenomenal defensive unit. But it is. I hear scapegoat. I kind of hear someone has to fall on the sword type of thing, because, look, the defense is atrocious. There's no way around that. For me, frankly, I'm not blaming coaching on this. Their defensive front is young, is not very talented, outside of these young guys. And I think it almost, when you're playing that much man coverage, you better get pressure. Otherwise, it's going to be really a long day for you and going to be difficult to stop anyone. And Aiden Hutchinson, good young player, but nothing special. Charles Harris been hurt most of the year. Romeo Okwara been hurt most of the year. Their second round pick, Levi Onwuzurike, from last year has missed the entire season, or will be out the entire season. So I get it. Again, like you said, someone maybe had to fall on the sword. I just think the entire defense is just lacking in talent. There's only so much you can do as a coach.
Yeah, I think that hopes were high for the Lions because of Hard Knocks, because they start off pretty hot, at least on offense. But at this point in the season, their offense and their defense just aren't matching up at all right now, where if their offense is playing well, the defense is terrible. When the defense is able to stop the opposing offense, and their offense can't get anything going. So maybe at some point those things will match up, but it does seem like they're probably destined for another high pick in the 2023 NFL draft. Let's stick in the NFC North. Minnesota Vikings tight end Irv Smith Jr. reportedly dealing with a high ankle sprain. Not great. Vikings off to a really hot 6-1 start right now. Their win total now for the season is set at 11.5. It was 9.5 coming into the season. So I think the Vikings obviously are going to be able to finish pretty strong here. But without Irv Smith in the group, then obviously, the playmakers do get a little bit depleted in there.
I think they're a sneaky, contender now, maybe for making a move to add a weapon. And I think Irv Smith bolsters that potential situation. He's obviously hasn't been incredible this year, but has been, kind of their number 3. KJ Osborne's been solid, had some touchdowns. But Irv Smith's been involved, a couple catches a game. They look his way. They try to scheme some things up for him. He's obviously, a solid young player that has dealt with injury after injury. There is rumblings that they're in the Brandon Cooks market. It sounds like Houston wants a 2nd-round pick for him. Maybe they're not willing to go that big, but maybe they poke, looking to Chase Claypool. They did obviously trade for Jalen Reagor already. But yeah, that's an important injury for them because Adam Thielen is good, but getting up there and got hurt in the last game, came back and just, not really the same type of player. God forbid something like happens to Justin Jefferson and that offense could go from one of the best to frankly, one of the worst really quickly. So I wouldn't be surprised if they make maybe a small move, but something to add a little bit of talent from the weaponry perspective before the deadline.
They also are one of those teams right now where if one tiny thing goes wrong, then I'm not saying that the wheels could fall off, but they're playing extremely conservative. Kirk Cousins' average depth of target is down by like 2 yards this season. They've been one of the least penalized teams in the NFL, which goes to, if someone goes down with an injury, if a veteran player who's dependable goes down with an injury, then a younger player could come in and start screwing that up a little bit. Really, their only metric as far as EPA per play is concerned that's above average is their run EPA per play. Everything else is right around the middle of the pack. So they are a team that I'm not sure how sustainable this 6-1 start is. I think that they're certainly going to be in the playoffs. I think they'll almost certainly win the AFC North and NFC North. But yeah, they are one of those teams where if one or two things goes wrong, then we could see them nosedive a little bit. Sticking with news right now, Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones still committing to running back Ezekiel Elliott despite Tony Pollard's 3-touchdown performance on Sunday. He said that the offense runs through Zeke. I mean, I think he's still going to be saying that when Ezekiel Elliott's like 40 years old and like literally on his last legs.
Yeah, it's like a speed dial button for him. He just goes right to it. It's pretty funny. I mean, Pollard was dominant in that game against Chicago Bears, and they are, coming into the game, we talked about that. They're a bottom 10 run defense and EPA per play allowed. They can't really set an edge very well against the run. And Dallas was just, killing them off tackle the entire time. Pollard has that burst to kind of get outside and then get one cut and get upfield. And maybe Ezekiel Elliott is now lacking. He's first right now in rush yards over expected, Tage Seth's metric, or I know he's up there. I think he's first. And Ezekiel Elliott is near the opposite end of the spectrum on that graph. So, it's great to have both. I think eventually they'll start to understand and realize maybe Pollard brings more explosiveness, can give you those long, touchdown runs because in Elliott's defense, like you do still see when you watch him turn 0-yard rushes into 4-yard rushes. And I think that's an underrated value add as a running back. And maybe Pollard is not good in that area, but there's never kind of the 50, 60-yard run, break-off touchdown. I think Pollard had 2 of against Chicago. Elliott just doesn't really have that top-end speed anymore. It's a funny situation, but yeah, like you said, Jerry loves the guy, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Yeah, I think that maybe you see a little bit more of a timeshare because I think that those two players can coexist. It's not like they've got so much more in their offense that they can't even put some of those two guys on the field sometimes at the same time, even though I don't think there's a huge value add for that at running back to have 2 running backs on the field a lot of the time. But yeah, we'll see how that goes for the Cowboys moving forward here. Final bit on Fresh Off the Wire before we move on to our next segment, trade deadline roundup. Not a ton of other buzz around the NFL, I'd say. Following most of Week 8's slate of games, maybe things on the trade deadline pick up a little bit tomorrow. But I will say that we're a little bit spoiled. The fact that we've already seen now, 4 or 5 pretty massive deals here at the trade deadline with Kadarius Toney, Robert Quinn, Christian McCaffrey, now Roquan Smith. So I don't know. I mean, obviously there's a lot of the names out there like Jerry Jeudy, Bradley Chubb, Kareem Hunt, Chase Claypool, Brandon Cooks, who could still get dealt. But like in most of these situations, typically no trade is more likely than a trade happening.
Yeah, we are, like you said, we are in a new era. I think we should appreciate it. I think it's so exciting and fun, and hopefully it continues where even 4 or 5 moves, look back a couple years, 2017 and before, if you got one move at the deadline, it was fun and it was exciting. So it's definitely still cool to see, and we're all about transparency here at PFF Wire, either direction. I reached out to 5 or 6 people and have received nothing, just crickets about any activity, anything they're hearing, any buzz going on. And again, they're not always going to say, yeah, here's this crazy thing going on, but really sounds like it is pretty quiet. That of course can change in the next 24 hours until tomorrow's deadline. I think results this weekend maybe swung in the wrong direction for some teams, like Denver winning. Maybe they try to stick it out and maybe see if they can make something out of the season. You have teams like Green Bay and the Rams not only losing but just being so obviously outclassed by a better opponent that maybe they sit back and realize, like, are we really buyers, or would it make sense to be buyers? I think Green Bay still should be, but nevertheless, I think some of that worked against us here. I think, we could see will be interesting tonight is how much Kareem Hunt is used by the Cleveland Browns. Brandon Cooks, I mentioned him earlier. He played. He had 4 catches for 73 yards. I think he was involved, and I think that that probably suggests they're not necessarily shopping him per se. Well, keep an eye on how much Kareem Hunt gets used tonight, and that might be an indication of whether Cleveland's keeping the door open to moving him and keeping him healthy.
Yeah, and if he's inactive or something like that, then that's obviously a huge tell that a deal could be coming. Drop your questions in the question section here on YouTube. We'll get to some of those there at the end. But PFF Wire is sponsored by Western and Southern Financial Group. While you focus on your roster moves, Western and Southern helps advance your money moves, buying your first home, planning to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow. Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. Team up to understand needs and address goals with game plan built just for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. Once again, if you want to drop your comments in there, we will answer some questions here at the end. Also, make sure to subscribe to the PFF Wire podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you don't want to watch us all the time on YouTube. Let's get into some of the action that we just witnessed in week 8 with our 1 up, 1 down segment. I will start this off with my 1 up, and that's Tua Tagovailoa for the Miami Dolphins. He had I think it was like a 96.5 or 96.1 overall PFF grade this week. Really, it's the highest single game grade by a quarterback this season. He earned the highest grade of any player this weekend. And I know it's kind of a cheat code to have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill in your offense and have, Mike Gesicki there and the goal line situations and everything like that. But Tua is also playing at an extremely high level right now. And it's kind of funny. I think that people thought that the 2021 NFL draft class of quarterbacks was going to be, at least as good, maybe even better than the 2020 class. Right now, that's completely flipped. And the way that Tua's playing, Jalen Hurts is playing, Joe Burrow is back on the ascent. I know that Justin Herbert has kind of struggled more this season than a lot of people expected. But, I mean, that 2020 class of quarterbacks really replenish the talent at the quarterback position here moving forward and probably for years to come.
Yeah, I kind of try to poke holes. Not try to. I poke holes into his game because you do watch sometimes. There's a lot of turnover when he plays. He was flawless. And yes, it's Detroit's defense. It doesn't matter. And he made some throws into tight windows. I want to say it was a touchdown to Gesicki, or another one was over the middle of the field in the end zone where there were like 2 defenders' hands in his window, and he fitted in. I mean, the size of a catcher's baseball mitt. It was an incredible throw. So credit to him. Looked really, really good in that game. My 1-up is Darius Smith, the edge rusher for the Minnesota Vikings. Signed basically a 1-year, $10 million deal. I think it was reported as 3 years, 42 or something like that. In reality, it was a 1-year flyer. He leads the NFL with 8.5 sacks, which means he already cashed in on a $500,000 incentive for those sacks. He is playing incredible football right now. I kind of didn't love Minnesota making some of these half measure, half in, half out moves. I was totally wrong. He's our highest graded free agent edge defender. And also kind of a side note, him, Justin Houston, and Melvin Ingram are all above 75 right now in pass rush grade, and all were available for 1 year, $10 million and less deals. Injuries kind of a question mark for all three of those guys, but these veteran edge rushers not getting big markets in free agency and then being really, high-level impact players if they stay healthy. Maybe there's a market correction coming forward there.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like really for years, some of those older pass rushers still kind of have something left in the tank there. Maybe they can't play 100% of snaps or anything like that, but it does seem to be a smart play to add one of those older pass rushers because they're not going to cost as much in free agency. Yeah, you might have to kind of go year to year with those guys, but a lot of the times it winds up working out. I think we might actually have the same down here. And mine was Jets quarterback Zach Wilson. I paid attention to that game pretty closely on Sunday because I was doing our game recap for the Patriots-Jets game, and it's the local game here. I live in New England and everything like that. I mean, Zach Wilson, I know other people have made this comparison, but Zach Wilson plays quarterback like he's Patrick Mahomes without any of the magic. Like, he's constantly, anytime that he faces pressure, he is running backwards 10 yards, running to the very end of the sideline, and then just before he's running out of bounds, tries to pull off this miraculous throw. And I ran the numbers on PFF. When he's either rolling to his left or right or scrambling to his left or right, he's completing 20% of his passes. And since week 4, he has the 4th most instances of scrambling to his left or right or rolling out to his left or right when facing pressure. It's not working. He's got 0 touchdowns. I think he's got 2 big-time throws and 7 turnover-worthy plays. He had 2 interceptions against the Patriots on those types of throws. It's not a sustainable way of playing quarterback right now. And I know that the Jets are winning, but they are winning despite the efforts of Zach Wilson. I think the Patriots did a good job on Sunday of having a blueprint and exploiting the Jets, especially with Breece Hall out now for the season, Elijah Vera Tucker out for the season. When he doesn't have Corey Davis, just kind of throw the ball up to and hope that he comes down with it. I mean, this could be a rough stretch for the Jets coming up if other teams are able to, stack the box to stop the run, get after Zach Wilson, and force him to scramble out and try to make something happen. And I will say that he hardly takes any sacks in those situations, but the plays he's making really aren't that much better than sacks.
Yeah, it's a great stat poll for you because I think unfortunately it's unavoidable. The reason they're doing it is because they have so many injuries on the offensive line. You have to move the pocket, but also that was his buzz coming in is he can make every throw off platform. He has the arm talent, can throw at every arm angle, can throw to his left, to his right. Obviously, the video of him rolling left and throwing that bomb in his pro day was the most shared video in the history of Twitter. He's not doing that in games. It is really, really hard to watch. So we did the same one. I'll pivot though to the guy he played against, who is just above him against pressure. Also has a 12.5 turnover-worthy play rate and a 22.1 passing grade is Mac Jones. And it doesn't even include that he what was I going to say? He threw a pick and it got called back for roughing the passer. It was a weak call, and it was the ugliest throw of the game, maybe. And that's with Zach Wilson doing what he did. So a tough game for the NFC or the AFC East. I think the Bills are probably feeling really good about themselves. Miami as well. It's just this, like we said, that 2021 class. Getting to worry time a little bit, even with Fields kind of trending the opposite direction. Obviously, his first 4 weeks were so bad, but getting it, worry time for that class.
Yeah, Trevor Lawrence played a pretty bad game against Denver Broncos. Denver Broncos looked like they were kind of back a little bit in that London game. Curious to see what happens with them moving forward there. But, yeah, I mean, Mac Jones, he had 1 interception when he was hit while throwing. He had a strip sack on the interception that he threw. I don't know what the hell happened. If you could give the Patriots some truth serum and figure out whether it was Jacoby Myers who went the wrong way or Mac Jones thought he was going to go the different way, or if Mac Jones' pass was just incredibly inaccurate. That pick 6 that got erased was about as ugly as you could possibly have. And just going back to Zach Wilson, I mean, his 2 interceptions, I legitimately think on one, maybe both of them, he was trying to throw the ball away and just didn't even get there. So if you can't throw the ball out of bounds when you're running to your right or left, what are you expecting to happen in those situations? I don't know. Let's move on. We've kind of roasted Zach Wilson and Mac Jones enough at this point. But before we get out of here, let's answer a couple questions, then we'll get into the Monday night game. One question here from Julian: if the Niners trade Jeff Wilson, what do you think the compensation will be? This is an interesting situation because it's kind of similar to the Rams with Cam Akers. I know that these players are at different points of their careers, but clearly the 49ers want to upgrade at running back from Jeff Wilson to Christian McCaffrey. And I think that something similar is kind of going on with the Rams, where they were in on Christian McCaffrey, at least reportedly. They've now gone to Ronnie Rivers, Darrell Henderson. I think when Kyron Williams comes off of injured reserve, they'll probably put him on the field over Cam Akers as well. But what that tells you is that, the teams that Jeff Wilson and Cam Akers are on do not value those players. So why should another team around the NFL value them highly in a trade? So I would say that for a player like Jeff Wilson, the best you're probably getting, you're better at this than I am, but a sixth, maybe like a late round pick swap, a 6-7 swap. I just, with so many running backs out there on the market, can't imagine the 49ers getting much for him.
You also just don't really have much leverage because Elijah Mitchell is expected to return in week 10, which is now somehow only 2 weeks away, which is crazy to say.
Right.
So he'll be back soon. And then Wilson's your RB3. You have a third rounder in Tyrion Davis-Price, who, occasionally gets in the game and does some things when healthy. It's 6 is the absolute best case scenario. He's a solid player, can run in this outside zone system. And of course, a lot of teams could probably use that, but you're not getting much better than that. And unlike James Robinson, he's on an expiring deal where he'll be an unrestricted free agent after the season. It's not like the team gets him for next year as well, as is the case with Robinson. 6 would be a win.
One other comment here from BD Davis, smart move Baltimore, even smarter move. Pay Lamar now before Burrow's payday comes up because the price then will be even higher. I mean, I think that day might have passed at this point where now you're dealing with, the season ending, then you get in the franchise tag, then probably sign a new contract extension after that. And I know we've talked about this before. You've got Joe Burrow's payday coming up. You've got Justin Herbert's payday coming up. And then even beyond that, you've got a Tua payday coming up with those other 2020 quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts you throw in the mix there as well. And then after all that happens, Patrick Mahomes probably needs a pay raise. So, these quarterback contracts are only going up at this point.
Yeah, it hurts because he's not a first rounder, does not have that 5th-year option, might actually be the most likely of that group. And he's kind of a similar player, has as many designed runs as Baltimore, even more so this year. And so that could be a situation where Lamar could even say, here's a guy that, like me, runs the ball in a designed capacity on a higher level than I do. And that team is willing to pay him. I mean, look, he grabbed that sign out of the stands, or I guess someone kind of threw it at him. But after the Thursday game, he made sure to go back and sign the pay me now or pay Lamar now sign and get a picture with the fan or whatever. It's not by accident. I mean, he's playing in a prove-it year. He's probably annoyed he didn't get the deal done. I think he made it very clear, like you said, I'm not negotiating midseason. This was a get it done before the year starts, or we're not going to talk about it until after the year. And I also think you can, like you said, beating guys to the market, that is when you get an early extension done. By this time, he knows it. He honestly might try to wait until July 14th after getting that franchise tag and hope that Cincinnati goes first, hope the Chargers go first, hope the Eagles go first. Yeah, that trick ain't going to work anymore.
One final one here. Terrence asks, do you think the Seahawks make a move? Personally, I'd be surprised. I feel like the Seahawks at 5-3 right now are kind of playing on house money, and they can be allowed to kind of see how this season goes along, see if they can continue this hot streak, see how far they make it into the playoffs if they get there. I don't think that they've got at least they shouldn't have serious Super Bowl aspirations at this point. They've also got the Broncos first round pick next year. So they're able to kind of succeed right now while also playing for the future with a lot of those young rookies playing a bunch of starting snaps. I personally kind of feel like they're better off kind of sticking with what they've got right now and then planning more for the future.
I agree 100%. I think the one thing I could see is we've talked about cornerback Sidney Jones before, and you're probably at a point now where you're thinking, hey, let's keep on to the depth, but he's not even active on game days. So they have backup cornerbacks ahead of him in the depth chart. The one move is I see moving him, and maybe instead of getting picks, you try to swap for a player. You lost Rashad Penny. Maybe you try to say, hey, we're talking about these outside zone running guys. Right. Hey, call up Dearness Johnson. We'll swap Dearness Johnson for Sidney Jones, something like that, to where it's a player for player deal where both teams benefit. Because yes, I mean, look, you always can use picks, but Seattle adding a 6th rounder next year, they have enough to not necessarily do that. So that'd be all I could see for them. I think the quiet ones that maybe make a move are the Vikings, the Giants, which I think is probably a bad idea, but it sounds like it's a real possibility. Right. I think those are kind of the sleeper buyers potentially.
Yeah, Giants are an interesting team where they're another team that I feel like should be kind of happy to be playing on house money with the way that they are right now. But I mean, they do have an extremely depleted wide receiver core. So, if they could get someone for the right price, which I think was one of the reports today, then maybe, but I don't think they should be giving up major draft capital to get a wide receiver or anything else in that group. All right, let's talk a little bit about Monday Night Football. You've got the Cincinnati Bengals playing in Cleveland against the Browns. Bengals favored by 3 points. Point total is 45. Bengals will be without Jamar Chase, though. They've said that they are not putting him on injured reserve, so it could be getting him back before that 4-game mark. But I'm personally curious to see if Joe Burrow and this passing attack can keep it up without Jamar Chase in the offense. Certainly, they're built better than most teams to withstand an injury at wide receiver with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, also in the offense, 2 very good wide receivers. But Joe Burrow, within the last couple of weeks, has been playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And I will say that Browns defense has certainly struggled this season. They've made some bad quarterbacks look pretty good this season. So if they could keep up that hot streak against anyone, it would probably be the Browns. But how are you feeling about this game?
Yeah, it's one where I'm kind of afraid of the spread. That's usually how I try to bet games. I don't love getting into kind of the alternative markets, but I think there's some interesting props tonight. The first one, obviously, without Jamar Chase, I think, and Cleveland does not have Denzel Ward, so what I think they're going to do is probably put a corner and then a safety over the top of T. Higgins, and they're going to focus a lot of attention on him. Therefore, I like Tyler Boyd over 5.5 receptions. I think he'll get a lot of work over the middle. And then another one on that side of the ball, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, maybe the best coverage linebacker in the NFL, is not healthy. The verbiage around him has been it's a true game time decision, and it kind of almost sounds like maybe he doesn't play. If he does, he's not going to be 100% healthy. I would try to wait as long as possible, maybe see if he's inactive, and then I like a Hayden Hurst over 3.5 receptions. With Owusu-Koramoah, I don't like it because I think he'll cover Hurst and do a good job of it. One more, other side of the ball. I talk about this ad nauseum, but Cincinnati, since they lost DJ Reader, New Orleans ran the ball on them very well. Atlanta ran the ball on them very well. Nick Chubb, not only do I like it just because of that, also, like I mentioned pre-show, if Kareem Hunt is kind of kept on the shelf, you may get more Nick Chubb touches, and I think it's a favorable matchup for Nick Chubb. So his over rushing yards, I think it's 89.5, something like that. Those are the 3 props I'm keeping an eye on for tonight.
One that I like is Joe Burrow over 23.5 completions. I know that that's probably a little bit lower because of the Jamar Chase injury, but the Bengals have struggled to run the ball this season. And I think that they will still be passing the ball. I think they've still got enough weapons in that offense to do that. There's only been 2 games this season where Joe Burrow has completed less than 23.5 completions in a game. So I kind of like, the over on 23.5 completions. As far as the line goes, I would lean more towards the Bengals and also probably lean more towards the over in that game, but probably not confident enough in that to actually put my own money on it. But I do think that the Bengals are a significantly better team at this point than the Cleveland Browns. But, Jamar Chase injury, there's some other factors in play there. But anything else you want to hit on before we get out of here for Monday's edition of the PFF Wire?
No, just kind of a counterintuitive point. Jamar Chase is so good at taking catches for 80 yards and touchdowns. Maybe it actually helps the completions because Burrow's checking down more and completing more passes. So that kind of came to mind as you were talking. But no, I think we see it the same way otherwise. And hopefully some more activity before tomorrow's deadline at 4 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, definitely. If there is more activity tomorrow, which hopefully there's at least one more trade in there, then we probably will join you for a special Tuesday edition of the PFF Wire podcast. If it is completely quiet and completely boring, then we will see you guys again on Wednesday. But everyone have a happy Halloween. Keep it on PFF.com for all of your news and analysis. Download the PFF app. Make sure to subscribe to PFF Plus. That is $79.99 a year. You can get a free weekly trial. Follow Brad on Twitter at PFF_Brad. Follow me on Twitter at Doug Kyed. And make sure to subscribe to the PFF Wire podcast on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts.